The harmattan wind carried the desert's breath hot, dry, and thick with a dust as fine as flour. It painted the world in shades of red and ochre, blurring the lines between sky and earth. Inside the stark, unadorned office, Captain Amara felt the gritty film on his skin, a constant reminder of the land he now governed. On the wall hung a map of his nation, a region in the north marked in thick red pen, pulsed like a fresh wound. He had not sought this power. It had found him, a tide of desperation washing him to the forefront. A decade ago, he was a young cadet at a military academy abroad, his mind sharp, his body disciplined. But a quiet restlessness gnawed at him. He missed the smell of the market, the vibrant chaos, the warmth of his grandmother's home. He returned home not to fight in a clean, distant war, but to live among the people, to understand their struggles. He saw the poverty, the injustice, the quiet hopelessness. This experience, more than any military training, shaped him. It forged a simple, unyielding truth in his mind. A leader must first be a servant. A low growl of a voice broke his thoughts. Colonel Bako, his face a map of old scars and weathered skin, entered the room without a knock. Bako was the loyalist, the veteran. His hands had held weapons since he was a boy, fighting the many conflicts that had torn their nation apart. He saw the world in absolutes. He saw Amara not as a young man, but as a symbol of hope. Reports from the north, Bako said, placing a tablet on Amara's desk. The screen showed satellite images of new encampments. They grow stronger. Their numbers swell. Amara looked at Bako. His own eyes, tired but fierce, met the veterans. They exploit our division, Amara said, his voice a low rumble. They feed on our fear. We must forge a new destiny, not as separate tribes or states, but as a single force. The enemy is this darkness. Bako gave a single grunt, a sound of agreement, a sound of resignation. He just accepted the statement that in another part of the city, in a sleek, air-conditioned office, Ambassador Diop sat with a cup of strong coffee. Diop was the diplomat, the man of protocol. A past failure haunted him, a crisis in a neighboring country that had evolved into civil war because of a rogue, impulsive leader. Since then, he had dedicated his life to process, to procedure. He saw Amara's charisma as a dangerous fire, an unpredictable force that could burn the fragile peace they had built. Diop believed stability required slow, deliberate steps, not the grand, reckless gestures of a young man. Far from the capital, in a cave carved into the dusty hills, the villain Al-Sadiq knelt on a prayer mat. He was a man of contrasts. Before his turn, he had been a respected religious scholar, his mind filled with a love for ancient texts. But a government airstrike targeting rebels in his village killed his wife and son. The tragedy did not break his faith. It twisted it. He saw the government, the international community, as corrupt, hypocritical forces. He came to believe that true righteousness could only be achieved by force, by fire. He became a whisper that grew into a scream. Now a low-powered radio sat at his side, its speaker crackling with the static of distant broadcasts. He spoke into a microphone, his voice a calm, hypnotic cadence. Your leaders are puppets. They drink from the cup of the West. They offer you false promises. True peace comes only with our law, with our faith. I am not a king. I am a deliverer, he smiled. His teeth were yellow. His eyes, though, were black, devoid of light. The violence came not as an open war, but as a cruel, precise strike. A remote village was hit. Al-Sadiq's men moved like ghosts. They used silent blades before the gunfire started. The village was a blur of screams and smoke. The men massacred civilians, then burned the huts. The air smelled of burnt wood and fear. They took one man, a respected imam, a spiritual leader to all. The imam was also Colonel Bako's beloved uncle. Al-Sadiq's message was simple. A video of the imam, his hands tied, his face serene but his eyes filled with a dignified terror. The message was broadcast for all to see. Submit or die. Amara watched the video in his office. He felt the bile rise. In his throat, he saw the faces of the dead children. He saw the fire. He looked at the imam's eyes and felt a cold rage. The world watched. Ambassador Diop sent a message. It was cold. The international community requires a full account. You must not escalate. We are prepared to send in a team to de-escalate. Bako was on the other side. His voice was a low snarl, thick with grief. My uncle, a man of peace. They desecrated him. We hit them now, hard. The people demand blood. For this, Amara felt caught between two opposing truths. To act was to risk the wrath of the world. To do nothing was to betray his people. He did not sleep. He paced the halls of his small home. He saw his grandmother in the kitchen, her hands shaking as she prepared tea. He saw the fear in her eyes, a fear he recognized from the imam. He knew he could not leave them unprotected. He made his decision. He stood before the Security Council. We go north, he said. The military goes in. We rescue the imam. He looked at Bako, a silent promise in his eyes. He then turned to his political advisors. I need an urgent meeting with ECOWAS now, not a formal one. I need to speak directly to the heads of state. His plan was not just military. It was a political risk. The plan went into action. The convoy of armored vehicles moved through the desert. The heat shimmered off the sand. The air was a furnace. Amara was at the front, his face covered by a scarf. Bako rode with him. This is not your place, Captain, Bako said. You lead from the capital. Your life is too valuable. Amara shook his head. The people must know I stand with them, not just in words, but in action, in the dust. Meanwhile, Ambassador Diop sat in his air-conditioned office. He heard of Amara's plan. He began to write a report, his fingers flying across the keyboard. The report was critical. It would accuse Amara of recklessness, of jeopardizing the entire region for a single man. He would recommend sanctions, but something stopped him. He watched the news. The video of the massacre played on a loop. The faces of the dead children filled his screen. He looked at a file, one that contained all the intelligence he had ignored. The reports showed Al-Sadiq's growing power, his ties to international criminal networks. Diop saw a man who would not negotiate. He looked at the village on a map. He looked at the faces. He saw his own face in them. He realized he had been fighting a ghost from his past, not the real enemy. He tore up the report. He wrote a new one. It spoke of Al-Sadiq's brutality. It spoke of Amara's courage. He sent the report to his superiors. It was a risk, a career risk. The rescue mission was a nightmare. Al-Sadiq's men were ready. They had set an ambush in a narrow canyon. The wind was thick with the smell of gunpowder and hot metal. Bullets flew. The convoy was a mess of fire and twisted steel. Amara's men fought with everything they had. They moved fast. They were a small, professional force. They took heavy losses. An RPG struck Amara's Humvee. It flipped over, throwing him from the vehicle. He landed hard, the wind knocked out of him. He had a gash on his arm. He ignored it. He ran forward. They found the imam in a small, damp cave. He was chained to a wall, his face gaunt, his body thin. Bako unchained him. "We must go," Bako said. They made it to the helicopters. They took off. The mission was a success, but the cost was high. Al-Sadiq, enraged by the rescue, struck back. He had promised to do so. He sent his men to the capital, not with an army, but with terror. A series of bombs went off. A market, a bus station, a government building. The city filled with sirens. The news showed burning cars, screaming people, a thick black smoke rising into the air. Al-Sadiq's voice came on the radio. "Your leader has brought this upon you," he said. "He is weak. Submit to a real leader. Submit to me." The pressure was immense. The president of a powerful neighboring country, a man named General Quaim, publicly condemned Amara. "This rash act has jeopardized the entire region," he said. He closed his country's borders, cutting off a vital supply line. International aid agencies pulled out. The press descended. They called Amara a failed leader. He had to pull forces from the north to protect the capital. His troops were tired. His political support was gone. The darkest moment came during a counterattack. A military base was overrun. Amara's men fought, but the enemy was too strong. They were overwhelmed. Bako was at the base. He led the retreat. A blast hit him. He fell. Amara received the news. He flew to the hospital. Bako lay on the bed. His eyes were closed. His face was pale. Amara sat in a chair. He felt a deep loneliness. He had lost his closest ally. He had lost the trust of the world. He was alone. He sat by Bako's bed all night. In the morning, Bako's eyes opened. He was weak. His voice was a whisper. "You fought for me, for the imam, for your truth. But the people, they need more. They need to fight for themselves, not just with guns, but with their hearts. You must inspire them." Amara looked at Bako. He saw the truth. He had been fighting a personal war. He had been fighting for his own legitimacy. He had not been fighting for his people's unity. He had to show them. He had to show everyone. The solution was not more force. It was more allies. He called his political advisors. He told them to organize a meeting. He told them to broadcast the meeting. He would speak to his people, but also to the world. At the same time, Ambassador Diop was on a plane. He had organized an emergency ECOWAS session. He had used his contacts, his relationships, to push for the meeting. He knew he had one chance. He showed them the video of the Capitol attack. He showed them the images of the dead. He showed them his report. It was his last chance to right a past wrong. The leaders listened. They looked at each other. They saw their own people in the faces of Amara's. They saw Al-Sadiq as a threat to them all. A sense of shared destiny filled the room. General Quaim, the man who had closed the borders, stood. "This is a fire that will consume us all," he said. The regional leaders agreed to a joint military operation. They would help Amara. They would fight with him. The final battle began. Amara's remaining forces went on the offensive. They moved against Al-Sadiq's main stronghold. It was a desperate move. Amara was at the front. The fight was brutal. Al-Sadiq's men were dug in. The fighting was fierce. Amara's men were tired. The enemy was fresh. They were pushed back. Amara felt despair. Then he heard it, the roar of engines. It was not his. It was a different sound. He looked up. A line of armored vehicles appeared on the horizon. They were not his. They were from his neighbors. They bore the flags of their nations. A coalition, a united front. They slammed into Al-Sadiq's forces. The tide turned. Al-Sadiq, trapped, tried to flee. Amara saw him. He ran. He chased Al-Sadiq down. They fought. Amara was tired, but he was filled with rage. He was fighting for his people, for his friend, for his nation. He disarmed Al-Sadiq. He stood over him. He did not kill him. He took him prisoner. A year later, the world was different. The capital was rebuilt. A new building stood in the center of the city. It was the headquarters of the West African Alliance for Security and Development. The flags of a dozen nations waved in the wind. Amara stood at a podium. He was no longer just a national leader. He was a regional one. Ambassador Diop stood next to him. Now he was a friend. Amara looked at the crowd. He spoke. "We are no longer alone," he said. His voice was full of emotion. "United we stood. United we will build our future." The journey was long, but the first great battle was won.